Hello there. Welcome to today's episode. We are in Rogaland County. Nice.
Avaldness. So where I was staying in Haugesund, right down the street was this place, and they had a museum that said King Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway, had his royal estate in Avaldness. So it's widely accepted that Harald Fairhair ruled from 872 to 930 and was the first king to unify all of Norway. One of the employees at the museum even told me they found a burial place around Avaldsnes of some royal figure, but they don't know who, which was intriguing. It could have been Fairhair, nobody knows. It also could have been Olaf Tryggvason, who built this church around the year 1024. Tryggvason was a hot commod at this museum. The museum loved him. He was a king of Norway, but only from 995 to 1000, so only 5 years. But Tryggvason gets credit for the first Christian church in Norway in 995, and for founding the city of Trondheim in 997. So I left Valdsnes that day, settled down kind of early because I found the coolest camp spot, and it rained most of the day. I wasn't really feeling it. And the next morning, God smiled upon me, and we had a nice day. And then it was onwards and upwards to Stavanger. Stavanger is one of the larger cities in Norway. It's pretty far south, so a lot of people have heard of it. On my father's side of the family, we immigrated out of Stavanger in the early 19th century, so fun fact. So I was excited to be in the city where my family at least took the boat from. They didn't live here, but I read an article from 2010 of the most expensive cities in the world, and surprisingly, Stavanger was number 6. But I would say that's reflective of all of Norway, not necessarily Stavanger itself. Stavanger's history is fraught with economic booms and recessions. For a long time, they were known for the fishing industry, shipping, shipbuilding, until 1969, when oil was discovered in the North Sea. Stavanger was chosen to represent this new oil economy in Norway. So I was looking at like what to do in Stavanger, and the number one attraction you gotta see was the oil museum. Which, you know, how good can an oil museum be? As it turns out, pretty awesome. So right when you enter the museum, you get, there's a movie that is shown every 15 minutes. Which you think like, okay, a museum movie, whatever. This one, so reluctantly go in, and it's a Hollywood presentation. I mean, the main actor is a very famous Norwegian actor. The film roughly translates to Oil Kid. It tells the story of a kid growing up in 1969, the same year that Norway finds oil, and struggling with his father as one of the pioneer workers of the industry. It basically ends with this very self-aware context that oil is such a huge part of the Norwegian economy and their ability to take care of their people, but it is a messy industry, right? But the film kind of conveyed that whole thing in an artistic way that by the time I got out of there, I was f***ed up. And then they releasing the museum to be like, all right, go learn about the history of oil. And I'm emotionally fragile at this point. So then in the museum, it kicks off, in 1969, this craft known as the Ocean Viking strikes oil in the North Sea, which they did not know it was out there, right? It completely changes the trajectory of Norway from being a slightly poor, almost third world country to the intellectual, socialist, wealthy, petroleum capital, utopian, whatever you want to call it, that it is now. Since 1971, Norway has accumulated more than $1 billion worth of gas and oil. The industry employs 200 to 300,000 people in the country, which is not even that crazy a number considering that in 2022, oil and gas accounted for 73% of Norway's export value. When Norway found oil, they went about it the way that everybody who has their own natural resources should go about it. The company that was the first company to find this oil in '69 was Phillips Petroleum, an American company. And they wanted the industry for themselves. Norway, aware of this and aware of what had been found, took steps to secure political control and ensure that the largest share of revenues from petroleum would benefit society as a whole. This came to be known as the Norwegian model. In 1990, they developed their own pension fund based off of the oil revenue. There's over $1 trillion in there. And that's for Norwegians. That's for the people. I didn't come to an oil museum expecting to have my heart touched. And that's what happened. Just a slick black tar pit on my open heart. Also, look at this room. So I was only in Stavanger for a day, and then it was time for me to ride out again. And that ride was not bad. Stavanger has like a super highway for bicycles. Look at this thing. And the wind was blowing at my back the whole time. This was one of those rides where I put on a podcast and set off. Nothing exciting happened. Nothing really to report. It was just a nice bike ride. So here's that. Now, all the territory south of Stavanger, all farmland, all people, one of the most densely populated places. So this evening, I stayed at a campground, which was okay. The next day I was heading into the mountains, and I knew they were coming. I wasn't looking forward to them. It was supposed to rain. I was watching the radar, looking for that. And while I was heading up there, I stumbled into something. A Norwegian cabin. This is called a Dagsterhytte. That's the best shot. That's as good as I'm gonna get it. And this one is in Hø. So these cabins, the best explanation I have is that Norway has so much money in the country that in a lot of counties they'll build these cabins with the surplus of money they have. And you're not supposed to sleep overnight in them, but they're free to use during the day for anyone to come along. This one had a fireplace. Shortly after I got here, it started raining, so I stayed and began to think about sleeping there until a group of 15 people showed up, and they were going to have a party. It was super awkward. I had to leave. I went out biking in the rain. It was very sad. It turned into a bad day, honestly, because if you read my journal entry of this day, I just was very angry. I mean, it was pouring buckets when I left, and they were annoyed with me even being there. It was just sad. I was sad. But the sun did come out. It's kind of funny. In my journal entry, I'm reading how angry I am and everything, and then it does say, like, oh, don't forget, the sun did come out this day. You know, all the things you're angry about aren't necessarily true. Not trying to spin like a rosy. It was, this is my personal journal, so I'm sharing it with you. And it did rain again. And the rain didn't really stop the rest of the time I was in Rogaland. This was a cool area known as Jøsingfjord, which has its own museum, some history. For instance, in April 14th, 1945, a raid took place here on German ships. 4 New Zealand pilots went missing after the raid and were presumed dead. Germany would surrender less than 3 weeks later. But looking around at the mountains, it's wild to envision 20 airplanes flying through here to bomb 2 German vessels in the water. At the bottom of the fjord is a location known as Hellerin. You might know this image from a magazine or a travel brochure or something. The houses are from the 19th and 18th century, and a museum stands right next door. I thought a good wrap-up for the episode would be a festival in the town of Flekkfjord, right on the border. Enjoy! Night-night. and Norwegian SpongeBob.
Det visst bare meg her.
Peace.